Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Vetted Biz. Excited to have on Sabrina Wall, who's the CEO and founder of Franchise Brokers Association, also known as FBA. Sabrina, thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
So Sabrina, tell me a little bit, how did you get into the franchising space?
Life kind of takes you in a direction sometimes if you let it, if you kind of open up and pay attention to your interest, things will unfold in front of you. And that's kind of what happened with me. I was looking for a franchise to buy. Much like many people that get into our industry, they go through that process of researching to find a business. And then in the process, I really fell in love with researching franchises because I was awakened to this experience that there are so many opportunities that I had no idea existed prior to researching. And so when I started uncovering this, it like lit this fire in me because I realized that really anyone who made some good financial decisions and, was diligent and put some discipline into their work experience, they could become a franchise owner. And at the time, I didn't know that much about franchising. I kind of thought that there were all these big, huge companies like McDonald's and Burger King, and they cost millions and millions of dollars. And then when I was going through the researching process, I discovered that really you could start a franchise for under $100,000 in some cases, and that you could do extremely well and have a good opportunity if you applied your talents and skills to that franchise. So just touching the idea or the knowing that there's so much opportunity and potential that's available to anyone who wants it, anyone who is allowing themselves to research and explore that path. And so it just drew me in, and I went through the process of becoming a franchise owner, and at the same time became a franchise broker and loved it, enjoyed the experience so much that I created the association with a board of directors, and we basically just focused on helping advance the industry and helping people to really know what is a good franchise versus maybe a not so good franchise. And so that's always kind of been our platform on the journey, is to help people to understand the investments that they're getting into so that they can make better investment choices.
What year was it when you invested in that initial franchise?
2006.
And did you have like a franchise advisor, franchise broker helping you, or was it just all your own independent research and you just reached out to the franchisor?
Well, yes, I did actually have a franchise broker who was helping me. And at the time, I was underwhelmed by the experience. He wasn't listening. He wasn't helping to get franchises that we were interested in. He just didn't do things in a way that I thought that you would do them if you were in this industry. And so I, kind of reflected on that and said, well, I think I can do, if he's doing well in this business, I think I can do as good or maybe even a better job than him. And so that is what I mean by it kind of led me on the path, and it happened to me and for me instead of really me trying to go that way. It was like, I never would have thought, oh, I want to be in franchising when I grow up. And that's what pretty much everybody in franchising says. They say, oh, I never would have thought that I would own a plumbing business, or I never would have thought that I would have owned a staffing company. It's because franchising, once you start going into it, you realize the opportunity, but it's usually not things that you sat and mapped out prior to. They come to you, and if you're open to them, you can have an amazing experience in franchising.
And it's interesting. I've met, including with FBA, quite a few franchise brokers that are also franchisees. Mm-hmm. And for me, that would be a bit overwhelming to, be having an operating business and you have employees and then advising clients on the side. Or, I don't know, maybe the franchise broker is full-time and you have a day-to-day manager. How did you manage that divide between advising prospective franchisees and running a real operating business?
Well, I had partners. So one of the things that I did is I used the referral fees that I earned as a franchise broker and invested in franchises with partners. So I had several franchises that way. And so I basically owned a portion of the business, and I would have the partner be the sweat equity day-to-day partner. And then I would kind of help and assist with certain functions of the business. So I wasn't the day-to-day in the store kind of franchise owner.
How many LLCs were you were a part owner of at your peak? Any estimate?
Personally, we did 3, and then we did franchises for about 23 different investors that we were supporting. So I had a tanning and spa concept. I had a commercial cleaning franchise, a restaurant franchise, and then a hair salon franchise. So 4 segments, and then a whole host, 27 in total, different franchises that were running. And wow. I was kind of helping support those and being the oversight and management and leadership of those.
And were these investors, the day-to-day operators, were they also taking on an SBA loan, like a 7A loan, or was it all just cash investment and they were mostly doing just sweat equity?
One of them, the spa, that had an SBA loan. Everything else was cash. The other investors, they were coming here for an immigration visa. And so we were running the businesses with them, and they were funding that through the immigration process.
Do you still have any interest in operating franchises, if you don't mind me asking?
Just a few. We have about 3 investors still that are at the final stages of getting their EB-5. So those are the 3 that still run. Other than that, I've sold the interest. And we went 10 years with the commercial cleaning company. And then about 7 or 8 years that I was with the salon and the spa. And then the hair salons and restaurant, they already got their visas and they're now taking over their businesses.
Part of the big appeal too with franchising, especially if you're coming from the professional space, where you're a doctor, lawyer, whatever service you're providing, even a consultant, is you can have an exit. Where if a doctor sells his practice, he'll get a lump sum, but he has to stay on as an employee, usually at less than he was making for 5 years. So it's not a true great return on your capital on that exit. I can imagine, probably at some points the price is right. And as a franchisee, you hit a certain amount and that there's maybe just be a bigger fish, or you want to move on to the next venture.
Right. Well, I think so. A lot of our brokers who are also franchise owners too, what they do is they'll have a manager in place. They'll be running, the brokering business, but they'll also be doing their franchise business. And they'll use that as kind of a transition plan as they grow their brokering business. They, put their franchise business up for sale, or maybe they will even buy more franchises with their brokering business. Everybody has a little bit of a different strategy of how they're growing wealth and what their tolerance is for working with people and employees. I mean, anytime you're doing something that you're not involved day to day, so you're not the main person running the business, you have to be comfortable working with people and managing people and leading people so that you can continue to inspire and motivate and support the manager in that process. So we tend to have brokers who are good communicators and leaders. We really focus on that leadership skill whenever we're bringing people into our organization, because people need help to find their own gifts and talents. And when you work with people that have a natural leadership ability, they can bring that out in the buyers that they're working with. And they can bring that out whenever they have franchises, they can bring it out in the managers that they're employing. And so that's kind of who we surround ourselves with at the association. And it just helps make for a good experience and the ability to expand like that. You have the capacity to scale when you can influence and support people to be higher and higher versions of themselves. And that's something that is a really important skill and asset in this field.
Really well said. And something that really sticks out for FBA, and we have a partnership where all FBA brokers get access to vetted biz, and they're some of the best in terms of user feedback and functionality. But we also have brokers from all different, the other 6 or 7 other brokerage groups in the franchise space that are members, and we're always getting feedback. But the thing that always sticks out is FBA, the training, that it's the best.
Yeah.
Tell me, when did you start focusing on training, and what was the impetus where you're like, let's double down on training? And that is a big reason why franchise brokers, even if they come from the franchising space, are constantly going to FBA because of the training that you guys provide.
Right. Well, I read a study done by, I believe it was FSU. They did a study where they looked at 100 different franchises, and they looked at their most successful franchisees and how they looked at the quantity of how many hit certain categories and levels of success. So this study basically concluded that one of the main reasons why those franchises that were succeeding more, or they had franchisees who were succeeding more, the one factor that they could pin it down to was the amount of training that they were getting in launching. And so they equated it exactly to the number of weeks of training and how extensive that support was. So at the time, we had a 3-day training, and we had a lot higher turnover of our franchise brokers. And so this was always something that was gnawing at us, because we got into the industry because we wanted to make sure that franchise brokers were succeeding, and yet we were having a lot of turnover at that phase of our business. And so we said, okay, we're going to get really aggressive about training and see if we invest a lot more time and effort into launching them well, will they be more successful in their businesses? And so we remodeled it. We turned it from 3 days to 5 weeks. And then we created near daily mentoring and support channels for the brokers to get ongoing support and help. And we found that the entire experience of the broker changed from about 50% retention to about 80% retention. And so we had such a dramatic change by taking the time to launch them well. And so it became just a foundational piece for us. And so now everything we do, we're thinking, how can we help train the brokers so that they can use and apply this to their businesses? So yeah, it's
a
really
win-win for everyone.
Go ahead.
Everyone has a cost acquisition. It does take time and money to basically bring in people to be franchise brokers at FBA, get them up to speed. And if the trend rate's high, which is pretty high for the industry, and I probably would imagine it's kind of similar to a real estate brokerage where there are real estate sales agents coming and going because there's not a huge upfront investment. And you're not signing a 10-year agreement like a franchise. You're not investing over $100,000. So people's life plans change. And if they're not required to, grind it during some down months, a lot of people, just throw the white flag and give up.
That's really common in lower cost investments. They tend to have a higher attrition rate because exactly as you said, that they'll say, okay, well, I can either hunker down, or if I decide to change, I can change. So it's a lot easier for them to shift and change. The risk isn't as high when it's a lower cost investment. But we don't want that. We're in the lower cost investment space, but we really value long-term relationships with people. That's what feeds my soul. That's the part that I love. That's the part that makes coming to work every day feel so amazing, is that when I can work with a broker and I can build a relationship with them and I can help them to grow and develop and to start seeing the success and wins in their business, and then have them be teaching their buyers how to do the same thing, how to be successful in the franchise purchase and award process. It's so rewarding. Like, it just makes you feel like, wow, I'm making a difference in what I'm doing every day. And that drives me, it makes the experience so much more delightful.
So Sabrina, right now it's March 2023. This video will probably be produced in April or May 2023. A lot of tech workers have been laid off. Accenture just laid off, I think, 19,000 employees globally. What advice do you give for professionals that have lost their job and are interested in franchising? Should they contact right away a franchise broker? What would you do in their shoes?
I would definitely talk to a franchise broker, because franchise brokers are in the business every single day. And so they're looking at and analyzing franchises all day long, every day. They're looking at disclosure documents. They're talking to reps. They're talking to franchisees. They're learning about the validation way before the franchise prospect who's like going through the process would ever have an opportunity.
They've been there, done that. They've been on all these calls.
Exactly. And so if the broker is spending all day, every day, learning these ins and outs and having attorneys review agreements and then talking to the buyer about what the attorney said, and not just one attorney, but 2 attorneys, 3 attorneys, 4 attorneys, like on and on and on. Having accountants and funding sources review the franchise for all these different cases. And then they're able to bring that insight to the franchise selection process. It's so much more impactful. And I know I didn't have any of that any real research in the process. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know what I was looking for. And like I said, I didn't have a great experience with the person I was working with. And so it wasn't until I got into franchising and was operating franchises that I started to realize, whoa, there's a difference in the quality of the different brands. And this one franchise over here, I'm getting no support with. And this other one, I'm best friends with the management team. One system I had, it was always breaking. Another system worked every time. There's all these nuances to what happens after you become a franchise owner. And because I lived it with so many different brands, I got to see the variety of experience. And I just want our brokers and our franchise buyers to understand how to apply that knowledge before they make a decision, and then make it with the research that makes it a good choice, not one where you're being forced, but one where you step into franchise ownership as a buyer with a full sense of knowing and clarity that this is what I'm going into and it's right for me. I know it's right for me because I've done the work to understand the investment that I'm buying into. That's the feeling that we want to spread, and it takes effort to understand that. So if somebody is getting out of another industry, if they're laid off and they just start looking at franchises, they're not going to know you can't find the same information online that you can find from working with a really high quality broker who does the research and uses tools like Vetted Biz to be able to analyze those brands and figure out what's going on and what the full picture is, not just what the rosy picture is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's analogous to an attorney versus like using LegalZoom, or even a real estate broker, which knows that there's going to be road construction on a property and you wanted to live in that apartment. This is a real case for us in Miami Beach. Yeah. And the broker is like, oh, like that road's going to be constructed in 6 months. I'd pass on that apartment. And we easily could have just like signed a lease and like been stuck there and then had to try to get out. So that kind of local knowledge that, at Vetted Biz, we have the quantitative, but we're not providing that qualitative insights like at scale that a franchise broker can. Mm-hmm. And thinking about that, so saying one of the listeners, they want to do franchising, but they're talking to a couple of franchise brokers, and the industry was very different when you before you started investing in franchises, where maybe there were 200 franchise brokers total. Now there might be 2,000 working under different brands and different systems. What questions would you ask a franchise broker, and maybe that you wish you had asked before starting to work with the broker that supported you on investing in your first franchise?
Well, I think when you're assessing a franchise and you're kind of looking at different brokers, they may say, oh, well, we all can give you the same thing, or go ahead and work with two of us. And what I find is when you're working with multiples, you can tend to step on each other's toes and create confusion in who's working with who. And it does get a little bit messy. But when you're evaluating what broker to work with, I think some of the key things that you would ask are, what are you providing to help me to understand the pros and the cons of the franchise? So that is information that isn't always easy to know. And you want brokers that are willing to face the challenges, because a lot of times people in, a sales or development role, they may focus on the sales and marketing material, and they kind of don't want to bring up the challenges, because if they do, then it could risk the sale. We teach our brokers to be the buffaloes. I don't know if you know anything about buffaloes, but buffaloes run toward a storm when it's coming, because they know they'll spend less time in the storm and less time in the challenge if they run toward it rather than running away from it.
That's awesome. I had no idea.
Oh yeah, they're a really interesting species. But they run toward the storm, and they get to the other side. They get to the solution faster. That's what we teach our brokers. Like, be brave. Don't shy away from the truth. In order to actually accomplish that, you have to be well-spoken. You have to be clear. You can't fall into fear whenever you're explaining something to a buyer. You have to explain what the issue is with the brand. And then you have to talk about, how it could affect you this way and how it could affect you this way. What are the ways to overcome it, in addition to the challenges it could present? A lot of brokers are just not going to do that. They're not going to talk about that because it's harder. It takes a higher level skill, and it takes courage. And it's our culture. So if a broker wasn't doing that, they would almost be like shunned because we're like a community and we're always talking to each other.
They wouldn't be a good fit for Franchise Broker Association, FBA.
Yeah. So we definitely, every broker that comes to us, we go through an individual analysis. We have some of our top brokers vet them. We have I talk to every broker to make sure that they're going to be a cultural fit and that they're going to abide by the values. They're going to actually commit to doing more work in the research portion, and that they're going to be brave enough to talk about the challenges with the candidate so that they're well equipped. And, the way that we explain it is if you face the challenges, even if they don't buy, let's say they say, oh, that scares me too much, I don't want to buy that. They still are going to be so loyal to you because they know that you've protected them and that you've done the right thing in advising them or giving them insights that help them to make a good decision for them. And so they end up telling all their friends and family and their circle of influence that, hey, if you want to buy a franchise, you have to work with this broker because they're going to do the right thing. And that's a skill that's hard to develop, but it's one that's really important. And it's one where we're all looking out for each other. And that always feels better as a business owner and as a professional when you're serving people and yourself in the highest intention and highest good. Well, then you get good results from that. People trust you. They are drawn to that.
So talking about, we talked a lot about the prospective franchisee, the candidates. Let's turn it to the franchisors, because a lot of stakeholders are selling franchisors, whether it's a PR agency, marketing agency, whatever law firm. They need FDDs registered in every state, even though you have zero franchises. There's a lot of people selling each other in the franchising space, and some franchisors really have their guards up. And other ones don't, and they end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars before they really need to. Any advice for emerging franchisors and how they can best leverage like a working relationship with FBA?
You're meaning when they're emerging their sales strategy and what their
franchisor, say, has anywhere from 1 to 10 locations open, and they're looking to sell franchises. We have a lot of followers in our podcast that fit in that bucket. Where they're early stage franchisors, founder led, and they might not work yet with FBA, and they don't know what the pros and cons of working with a franchise broker.
Right. Any franchise that we work with, you want to make sure that the franchise has a good process, that they're organized, and that they've done enough education that they understand what happens in franchising. Sometimes when a franchise is too new, they kind of jump into it without putting in the education so that they can speak to franchising. And if you're going to be a franchise, you should also learn your industry. So there are some tools out there to help. But, the International Franchise Association, they have what's called a CFE, a Certified Franchise Executive. It's a certification, and it teaches you franchising, and you learn with all kinds of other franchises how to be a good franchisor. So I would recommend doing some of that work so that you are educated about what a franchise is supposed to offer, and that you're providing that to your franchisees. I know that when you're new and you've got, just a few franchises under your belt, it's really important to make those early franchisees as successful as possible. Like, you've got to really fight for them and invest with them, because they are going to be the foundation of the entire business. That first 12, if they validate well that you were there for them as an owner, that you helped them, that you invested in them, that you were always available, that you made it happen with them, and that you were reasonable and you supported their interest, that comes through in the validation calls, and you're able to gain more and more and more franchise owners. But if you have really conflicting relationships where you're fighting with your franchisees and you're not using a level of emotional maturity, then it can be very, very difficult to launch well, because the franchisees will not support you. They won't validate and say, yes, get into this franchise. And those first brands, those first franchise owners, you really need them to be behind you and growing the system together. So I would suggest being smart with your time, pulling everybody together as regularly as possible to help support one another and have conversation, and then get yourself educated and make sure that they sing your praises, because you've been praiseworthy.
Any success stories of a franchisee or franchisor you've recently worked with, or maybe one of the brokers an FBA has recently worked with?
Yeah, one that stands out to me is a franchisee that he kind of came from an operations and real estate background. So he'd been running properties and working for a property management company. And he started working with one of our brokers through what we call co-broker program. And he basically went through the process to try and find different brands. So he wasn't investing a lot. He was kind of conservative at first, but he was looking for something that he could really scale with. And he had a lot of energy and just a really bright, smart person, like somebody that you want to be around, you want to work with. And the broker introduced him to a company called Painter One. And Painter One, I don't know if you've heard about them, but they're really unique as a franchise system because they do a lot to make the ownership interest of the franchisees more elevated than other brands that I've seen. So they have, I think, the most.
What would be some examples of how they do that?
They give ownership interest back, like from the franchise system. So they, as a franchisee, you become an owner of.
So it's like a co-op almost?
Your own franchise unit, but you also have ownership interest in the franchisor.
Okay, so it's like phantom stock or some mechanism that you benefit. If everyone benefits, that the franchise brand system level, you also benefit.
Exactly. So they have ownership interest, and then they also they have this coaching program where if a franchisee has done well, they will have new franchisees mentor with that franchisee. And the mentor and the new franchisee work together, and they take a portion of the royalties and actually pay the mentor franchisee. The mentor franchisee earns residual income, recurring income from being a mentor to the newer, younger franchisees. So they can actually have a second line of income by being really good at their role. And so this franchisee that I'm talking about, his name is Gene. He did that. He now has 5 mentees. He went through and actually started the business. He started right at COVID, and usually when things are coming crashing down and, the market's changing, a lot of people will freak out and will act in fear. But one of the great things about franchising is that when you have great leaders in franchise that pull people together, then they figure out the strategy and they adapt, and then they keep plowing forward. And Gene was kind of instrumental in that, and they all worked together through COVID, and they thrived. And he actually really succeeded during that time when everybody else was panicking. They were growing their business, and so he's already bought a second location, is a mentor, and he came to our conference. You might even have met him at conference, but I think he's a really great example of when you match a good, energetic franchise owner with the franchise system, and they have the shared values, how it can just blossom into these like multiple opportunities and growing, thriving businesses. And it's just really exciting, like that, to know that we are making that kind of impact, that we can give that gift to people and, get them into a relationship where they're bringing out the exceptional parts of each other, and then they're blossoming in that. So it's just really, really nice. It's a fun experience.
Sounds like Gene could be like my next podcast guest.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Let's make that
definitely
happen. I love interviewing now franchisees. I get a lot from that. And especially the ones that will open up about the numbers and the pain and how at one point they wanted to, stop. It's so helpful for people that are prospective franchisees or even current franchisees that might be considering, a second brand.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. I'll definitely get you this information.
So that model, I like it better than the area developer model, because basically you sign an area development agreement and the franchisor doesn't know necessarily how you're going to perform until you're already running, and you are responsible for ongoing support of franchisees in your area, recruitment in your area.
Yeah.
And, there's no legal commitment and contract commitment, but you haven't really proved yourself. And you're acting as a mentor without earning that right through, doing. You've earned that just through a monetary component, which, as we both know, money is all around. There's all different ways to finance businesses, but it is difficult getting like a true great operator or executive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very unique model. I've never heard of something like that, but they've done a great job. It's been very effective for them. And, it just makes the franchisor kind of a franchisee's system. It's really pro franchisee, and that's always great because they're the ones you want to win.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's other systems that, are very pro franchisee, but there's just not much territory available, whether it be Domino's or Chick-fil-A. And then with Chick-fil-A, you'll earn a lot of money ongoing, but there's no exit. There's no big multiple. They just take the store back and you're effectively a high paying manager, but you don't have that great exit in year 7, 10, whatever.
Yeah.
Sabrina, any concluding thoughts for prospective franchisees?
Well, franchising is a very, very strong industry or segment of business in that you've got private equity coming in, you've got a lot of capital coming into franchising. And 2, franchising is different in that you have the corporate infrastructure of a larger kind of company, but in that corporate infrastructure, you still have the feel of a collaborative team that's innovative and can act quickly and can move and get things done. So a lot of times when businesses get really, really, really big, they're like a giant ship that's difficult to maneuver and turn because there's so many levels of compliance and complexity and who's got to know and all of that. And franchising is one of those unique segments that allow for the infrastructure of a larger type system, the technology, the tools, the learning capacity, the scale, but also still have that mobility and flexibility of a smaller system so they can turn and react to market conditions and to the needs of their franchise owners and to the needs of their customers a lot more quickly. And it's one of the big values of franchising that I think are underexpressed. Like most people don't talk about that. They talk about having systems or they talk about, having a good brand name, but really it's about how the people in the system are able to react and lead through any situation. And so the franchises that do really well are the ones that can have that flexibility and mobility, and then also have this really excellent leadership team behind them so that no matter what occurs out there, they're always helping bring people to higher levels of professionalism and coping and execution on their businesses. And that's a reason why I think it's so attractive and it continues to grow. You've got long-term relationships that have this flexibility and really can adapt to any marketplace, which they've proven over my experience. I've been in franchising since 2006, so a lot has happened. And in that time, I've seen they've just adapted and adapted and adapted. And it's so cool to be part of an industry segment that has all of those skills put together.
Really well said. I mean, we're still crunching the numbers at Vetted Biz, but it looks like franchises greatly overperformed independent mom and pop businesses during COVID in terms of closures.
Yeah.
Where franchisors together with the franchisees were communicating right away. Oh, PPP loan, you got to use this bank.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the next PPP loan, get this bank. Oh, idle loan, definitely apply for that. You can get, $500K, $1 million, 1.5 ERC credit. You can apply. Here's an advisor.
Right.
There are all these government benefits that if you were in the know were really a great lifeline and kept the business going, as well as with the franchisor saying, okay, like talking to a vacation rental property management business. Okay. Yeah. Usually you had 2-week stays or 1-week stays. You're going to have to change it and we're going to do 3 days, 4 days, and let's have a big marketing push.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Things like that. Or that example actually was reversed where people were saying more time because they had more time to work remote, but they were just able, franchise system after franchise system that we've studied, they adapted very fast during COVID and they did fine with minimal closures. And some of the legacy brands that were really big, didn't do as well for whatever reasons. They couldn't adapt. Maybe it's like a restaurant business where it's a really restricted menu, and maybe delivery or takeout didn't do well for that concept. So they couldn't really adapt much. But across the board, through most industries in franchising, they could adapt much better than if you were an independent business, or if you were a corporate Goliath, and you just couldn't make the change happen in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think franchising does have the Fran Pack. So IFA does a lot of government lobbying, and that does help. The IFA announced a lot of updates really early and quick. And every single day they had meetings and announcements which told the franchise community, hey, here's what's going on, and how do you handle and manage this? And they led a lot of people through some difficult challenges. And then I think that's why you'll see a lot of franchises that were able to say, okay, here's what I have to do. Here's how I can do it. Here's how we can think on our feet. They use the collective knowledge and the insights of government policy, regulations, and the lobbying efforts that they had access to in order to get more insights faster into the hands of the franchise community.
Well, Sabrina, I really enjoyed our conversation today. You've been a great sponsor to Vetted Biz, and we've been very happy with, as Vetted Biz, we don't help one-on-one consulting, brokerage, any of that. And your FBA brokers have done a great job for our clients. We'll be sure to leave your firm's contact information if people want to work with a franchise broker. And just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone who's interested in learning about franchising. It's a wonderful, wonderful space with lots of love. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you, Patrick.